Truck drivers, what's a creepy story you've got from the middle of nowhere? Oh boy, did I go down the Google hole with this one. Apparently there was an older guy in Oklahoma City who went by the handle Bam Bam on CB Radio Channel 19, and had a recording of the I Ain't Got No Panties on that would play every so often on his ridiculously, illegally overpowered CB radio setup. Later he had another creepy recording he'd play. He was infamous amongst truckers and amateur radio operators across the country because when atmospheric conditions were right, his signal would skip halfway around the country. His name was Klaus Kramer, and he got busted by the FCC at least twice, and was fined $10,000. This was around 2001, and the docs of his FCC trouble are public. Edit. What I forgot to add was that it became a stupid in joke amongst bored truckers, or those trying to annoy, so the phrase lives on even though Klaus's original hijinks have been squashed. Driving through rural NM, beastie area with the crazy melted rock look. No plants or anything, just rock and sand. Monsoon time, raining cats and dogs just pouring so hard you could barely see going 20 miles per hour. Thunder and lightning just rocking the car, sometimes turning into hail and pounding you. Just a nasty storm, came around a corner, and the whole countryside legit on fire. Like 20 tall flames, hundreds of yards in all directions while pouring rain at dusk. Just rocks and dirt wildly on fire in the pouring rain. Just slowly drove on. Was totally freaky and surreal. Honestly thought I may have hallucinated it. Checked the news. A propane truck slid off the road going way too fast and apparently busted open pretty violently and lit on fire. Never saw the truck. Must have been behind something. Felt a bit bad after about not stopping. A good buddy of mine is a long-haul trucker for my company. A few months ago, he woke up in a parking lot surrounded by police. Some dude had gotten shot and dumped 15 feet from his truck. Was he a suspect afterwards? No. It sounded like the police already had a good idea of what happened. He gave a statement saying that he saw nothing. The guy was killed elsewhere and dumped in the parking lot by his truck. My friend drove for a few years a while back. He told me he was driving a rig very late at night in Utah, driving on a lesser-used 2-lane highway. He said he remembers feeling very alert that night, so he noticed what appeared to be a figure manifesting up ahead on the dark road. Told me it wasn't on the road but just next to it. He then comes to a stop and grabs his heavy-duty flashlight and points it at the figure. He then describes it. Apparently this humanoid creature had a dead coyote it was eating and the truck had gotten its attention and pissed it off. So it sorta stands up so he can get a full view of the thing. It was gaunt, with very big eyes, and of course the coyote blood all over its face. Its height was about 6'2", it had skinny limbs, no clothing. He then describes how it started to shuffle slowly towards the truck. Not only does he not have a weapon at that time, the only usable weapon being his flashlight, is actively helping him view this creature. He decides to book it and leave. Had no problem passing it. Turned around to see it standing in the middle of the road on 2 legs as he drove away. When he reaches the nearest rest stop he sees 2 other truckers talking. Apparently my friend wasn't the only one to see the thing. Both the 2 guys looked as horrified as he was. As for my opinion on my friend's encounter, I have to say, my friend isn't one to lie, so his story had me intrigued. I told him maybe what he saw was some mentally ill person out there, but he brushed the idea off saying he knew what he saw wasn't human. I'm not the superstitious type, but his story really did creep me out. Okay, got one while I was actually driving a bus, made out of a truck, in the deserts of Central Australia. I was over 500 kilometers from the nearest town, so yeah, middle of nowhere stuff. So I was out on a 5-day charter to pick up a bunch of Aboriginal elder women to go and get their women's business health checks done, pap smears and mammograms etc. I believe. On the day I took them to get that done we went via a place called Mintabi so they could shop in the clothing and whatever store that's randomly in this little opal mining area of South Australia. We left from there quite late to make the 3 or so hour journey back to where we were all staying overnight. The next day I'd take them back to their respective desert communities. The passengers all fell asleep as they'd had a very long day, as had I, but that's my job. Even the nurse who was traveling with us fell asleep. So there's me, all alone in the cab of the Mercedes truck-derived bus, my 30 passengers all sleeping in the darkness of the passenger pod behind the cab, and it was around 9 p.m. Up ahead in the distance I see a headlight coming towards me along the lonely desert dirt road, so I dip my lights so the spotlights go off and adjust to see only what low beam will show me, I drive down into a slight dip of a dry creek bed expecting to see the car with only one headlight anytime shortly. It's nothing unusual to see a car with only one headlight out there, so I'm not even remotely bothered. As I come out of the dip, I put my spotlights and high beams back on and there is no car, no nothing, just the empty dirt road. There is no dust in the air and I can see a good distance in front of me and out to each side. There was nothing there, just the empty desert, the dirt road and me alone in the cab. I keep the lights all on until we come to a stop about an hour later. I didn't see any cars or anything the rest of the journey. Before I let the passengers out, I ask if any of them saw the light and they all go dead silent, and after a short while they start talking in their own language, Pityantyatjara and Yankunityatyara, hurriedly, and then they all get off the bus. A few minutes later, a couple of the ladies come up to me to ask me to tell them exactly what I saw without leaving anything out and to describe exactly where I saw it. Now I'm a big guy, I've lived on 3 continents, I've been a police officer, a teacher, bus and coach truck driver, all sorts of things. Let's just say that I'm pretty skeptical, but I do have an open mind. I'm not scared by much in this world. After I told these ladies everything from start to finish and described in minute detail exactly where it happened, I took note of exactly how far out we were when it happened. The 2 ladies looked at me with the whites showing in their eyes, they looked spooked, and they said, and I'll never forget the way they said it, "I got on great with the indigenous people of Central Australia and I trust that I know when something rattles them." They said, "This driver, we are so lucky that you did not stop, because if you did, no one would have seen any of us ever again. We'd all be gone." I asked why and they just shook their heads and said to not talk about it because it had scared all the ladies. I'm sure many people have heard about the Min Min lights in Western Queensland. Well, whatever these ladies knew about whatever I saw in our location, they were convinced that it wasn't something you wanted to meet in the desert at night. I only ever saw this once. I only saw it for maybe a minute and it just looked like a car headlight a couple of kilometers away up the road. But I'll tell you what, if the ladies that come from this area, and whose people have survived in this desolate, remote part of the continent for 60,000 years are worried to the point of all being scared, I certainly don't want to mess with whatever it is. My dad drove a truck between Edinburgh and London and tells this story often. He was driving down the motorway and looked to his right, saw a woman with a Miss Trunchbull bun, as he describes it, staring at him with a terrified expression from a car next to him. Before he really knows how to react, the car pulls off at the next exit and my dad, although shaken, carries on. About half an hour later, a different car with a different driver pulls alongside my dad, with the same woman in the passenger seat, with the same expression on her face. My dad thinks fuck this and plans to pull into the next services to report, as even if it's nothing, misunderstanding, better to be safe than sorry, right? Anyway, the car disappears before he can get any details, plates etc., and he thinks there is no point calling the police with no details, so he carries on driving. Literally about 4 hours later, almost in London, yet another car pulls alongside him with the same woman, same Miss Trunchbull hair, same terrified expression, except this time she appears to be screaming at my dad through the window, so my dad pulls over into a lay-by and calls the police. Apparently they have received 3 other calls about the same woman, car in the same area in the last few minutes. It is unfortunately anticlimactic, as he never heard anything more about it, but he didn't see her again, and although he kept an eye on the news, didn't see anything about it. Hopefully it's just a giant coincidence. Who knows?